Welcome once again, my fellow manipulators of digital fate. I'm Richie, this is Capricorn, and today we're back at it with another spoiler video for Final Fantasy. And you might be thinking what I'm thinking is, isn't the debut not happening until Saturday, which at the time of this recording would be tomorrow, at PAX East? And you would be right, but it seems that they wanted to whet our appetites by teasing just a few sprinklings of cards over the last couple days. So we do have a few commander cards and a few cards coming to the base set to actually go over before the proper debut kicks off tomorrow. But be sure to come back for that because we're going to cover it in all of its glory and get all of those spoilers out to you guys ASAP. So we'll see you tomorrow for that. But here, we do have some interesting spoilers to talk about to sort of whet our appetite and just get these out of the way before the big hits happen tomorrow at the debut. Before we dive in, please like the video. It helps me get it out to so many more people and helps the channel grow. And also subscribe so you never miss any of my uploads. Like I said, tons of crazy spoiler content on the way, but I've also got a couple deck techs queued up that are going to go live pretty soon that I think you guys will find pretty interesting. But with all of that out of the way, catch me live Monday through Friday over on Twitch. That's twitch.tv/QuarantineCapricorn. Because if I'm alive and I'm breathing, I'm there and I'm streaming. But let's get into the cards. So we're going to start with the commander cards that have been spoiled. Get those out of the way, and then we'll dig into the juiciest of the cards coming to the actual standard set. So first off here we have Hildebrand Manderville. And if you guys have played Final Fantasy XIV at all, you know how absolutely ridiculous this character is in the game. His story arc is sort of like a side story arc that continues to carry through every expansion that you can keep kind of going back to and referencing. And it's sort of like a comedy relief sort of side quest, side story arc, but absolutely ridiculous and hilarious. And the card represents that in all of its glory. This is a 2/2 legendary human detective for 1 white and 1. Creature tokens you control get +1/+1, and when he dies, you may cast it from your graveyard as an adventure until the end of your next turn. So it's sort of like a Mosswood Dread Knight, except it's in the colors of Orzhov instead of Golgari, and it gives all of your tokens +1/+1, so it's sort of a token lord as well. But the adventure is Gentleman's Rise, a black instant for 1 black and 2. Create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. So instead of drawing cards like you would with Mosswood Dread Knight, you're making a zombie creature token, then you're playing Hildebrand, that zombie's becoming a 3/3 because of the buff, and any other zombies that you've already made, or any token creatures in general. And then if Hildebrand dies, you recast Gentleman's Rise, make another zombie token, replay Hildebrand, buff up all your zombie tokens again, rinse and repeat. So every time he dies, you're just getting more and more and more zombies. But you're not drawing cards, you're not digging into your deck like Mosswood Dread Knight would, which makes it kind of interesting. I think the most interesting part of this is you see that it's a legendary creature and that it's coming to the commander set, and you immediately think you want to use it as a commander, and you could, but part of the value of the card is letting it go to your graveyard and then casting it from your graveyard, which is a little bit weird with an actual commander having to make the choice of putting it in your command zone or not. Seems a little bit, I don't know, not as elegant as I'd like. That being said, it's still a pretty fun card. I could build some really crazy commander decks around this for sure, and it's a fun twist off the whole Mosswood Dread Knight idea, which I think is pretty cool. But we're going to move on. Let me know how you think of this card, what you think about this card, what you'd want to play it in, what you'd want to build around it. Let me know in the comments. But next up, we've got Tifa Martial Artist. This one was actually spoiled a little while ago, but the official spoiler is out now. When I originally covered it in a short, it was only the leaked image. We do have the official one, so I'm just going to go over this really quickly for those that haven't seen it before we get to the other newer stuff. This is a 4-mana 4/4 legendary human monk in the colors of Naya. She has the melee ability, so whenever she attacks, she gets +1/+1 until end of turn for each opponent you attacked this combat. And whenever one or more creatures you control with power 7 or greater deal combat damage to a player, you untap all creatures you control. If it's the first combat phase of your turn, there is an additional combat phase after this phase. So, you can attack if you have at least 3 opponents. This attacks, it itself becomes a 7/7 because of its melee ability, which means it's going to trigger its second ability by itself. right? Even if you have no other creature attacking that player, you'll be able to trigger it by itself and get an additional combat phase, and that alone seems pretty good. The fact that you don't have to lean on so many cards to turn this on, you just have to play it in the right format in Commander against, you know, in a normal pod of 4 players or more at least, and it just turns itself on. It makes it really, really good. I think just an easy way of getting basically double attack phases every single turn. Seems like a pretty cool card. Like I said, we already kind of went over this one, so I'm not going to go super deep, but still super rad. I could see a lot of people making some interesting Commander decks around this one. Next up, we've got Yuna Grand Summoner, a 1/5 legendary human cleric for 4 mana in the colors of Bant, and she has the Grand Summon ability, so you can tap her to add a mana of any color, and when you next cast a creature spell this turn, that creature enters with 2 additional +1/+1 counters on it. It's important to note you don't have to use the mana to cast that creature in order for it to get the counters. Tapping this thing does 2 things. It gives you a mana, and it turns on the ability for your next creature that you cast this turn to get the counters. So you could theoretically cast the creature for free, like an Ornithopter, and it could come into play with 2 +1/+1 counters on it, and then use the mana to, like, I don't know, level up a level up card, or a class, or something like that, or a talent, stuff like that. So you don't have to use the mana on the creature in order to get the counters, which I think is just a little bit of silver lining value that makes this card a little bit better than it would otherwise, and it's very easy to overlook that, so I think that matters. Also, whenever another permanent you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, if it had 1 or more counters on it, you may put that number of +1/+1 counters on target creature. Now, there's a couple interesting notes about this as well. First of all, this ability gets turned on for every single creature you control that isn't Yuna. So all of your creatures are getting to shoot their +1/+1 counters over to whatever creatures you want whenever they die. So if you were in like some kind of a +1/+1 counter sacrifice hybrid, you could just start sacking your dudes to shoot your counters everywhere else, pile them up, get whatever value you can, and just kind of rinse and repeat, which could be pretty cool. But the more interesting thing to note about this ability is that it doesn't take just whatever counters are on the thing and put them on a new creature. It specifically takes whatever counters are on the thing and turns them into +1/+1 counters and then puts them on a creature. So if you have a creature with a flying counter and a lifelink counter and a trample counter on it, and that creature dies, that'll give you 3 +1/+1 counters to put on whatever other creature you want. Which is kind of interesting, the fact that you can convert other types of counters into +1/+1 counters, and then you could go one step further, and you could do that with like stun counters, counters that aren't good, counters you don't want on your creature, and your guy dies, and now they turn into a benefit. And I feel like there's a really deep sort of pool of potential there to tap into, and I'm not sure exactly what to do with that yet, or what I would want to do with that yet, but there's definitely some craziness there to tap into for sure. So if you guys have any ideas about like the craziest way to utilize that kind of synergy and to get the most out of this ability to turn other counters into +1/+1 counters instead of whatever they were before, definitely let me know in the comments, because like I said, I think there's a ton of untapped potential there. And this card could be nuts if it has the right cards that can synergize with it appropriately. But let's move on. We've got our last commander card of today. That's Grahatia Scion Reborn, a 2/3 legendary cat wizard for 3 mana in the colors of Esper. He has lifelink, and he also has Throw Wide the Gates. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you may pay X life, where X is that spell's mana value. If you do, create a 1/1 colorless hero creature token and put X +1/+1 counters on it. Do this only once each turn. I have a few thoughts about this card. First of all, you need a lot of life to fuel that Throw Wide the Gates ability, and so the fact that it has lifelink itself is nice, and you probably mostly want to use it in a deck that centers around life gain and life gain triggers, so that you'll always have enough fuel for that ability. But going one step further, it is kind of weird that it triggers specifically off of non-creature spells, and since it only triggers once a turn, you're going to get the most value off this by trying to include non-creature spells that are as expensive as possible. If you can use all of your mana to play one big non-creature spell each turn, you can get the absolute most value off of this. But at the same time, most life gain decks center around creatures that can gain you life in different ways, usually upon entering the battlefield and stuff like that. So it seems a little kind of weird and at odds with itself. Like, it definitely wants to be in a deck with plenty of life gain, but it also wants to be in a deck that's very creature light and has just a ton of expensive non-creature spells. I'm not entirely sure what that deck should look like yet, or what is the best fit for a card like this, but I'm sure there has to be some very specific archetype that this would just work super well in. That being said, even just being a 3-mana legendary creature that you can use as a commander seems pretty good. You know, it can be a very cheap commander that still gives you access to 3 colors, which I love. But I'm really scratching my head just trying to figure out the absolute best possible deck to build around him. Like I said, because the stipulations of what you need to what kind of hoops you need to jump through in order to use his ability to its maximum potential doesn't usually mesh with a deck that's trying to gain as much life as possible, and I feel like you need those 2 things to make the best possible deck with Grahatia. So if you have ideas, let me know in the comments. I'm all ears. I'm sure there's some crazy deck out there, and I'm curious what that is. But let's move on to the standard legal cards in the base set. First off, we have an uncommon. This is Shantoto, Tactician Magician, a 0/4 legendary dwarf wizard for 3 mana and the colors of Izzet. And whenever you cast a non-creature spell, Shantoto gets +X/+0 until end of turn, where X is the amount of mana spent to cast that spell. If X is 4 or more, you draw a card. This thing is nuts, specifically because it's an uncommon. I don't know if it's good enough for Constructed. It probably isn't. But in Limited, just having an uncommon that has the sort of draw potential that this card has seems kind of nuts. That being said, you do have to build around it, right? It only draws you cards if you're playing specifically a non-creature spell that costs 4 or more, which is not the easiest hoop to jump through, right? But even if you're not drawing cards, you still get to buff up Shantoto and be pretty aggressive with your 3-drop, and I'm sure there is a very specific archetype within Final Fantasy Limited that can make great use of this card. But I'm not entirely sure how good it is until we see the rest of the set. And the one thing that I will point out about Shantoto is that it would be super good with the new summons that are coming that count as sagas, but they are creatures, except those don't work like traditional sagas where they're a non-creature, right? Because they're summons, they are also creatures. So they're actually not going to be able to trigger this. That was my first thought, is like, oh, all of the summons will be like probably more expensive than normal spells, and you can get a ton of value and still trigger the Shantoto. And then I was like, but the whole gimmick with the summons is they're not just normal sagas, they're saga creatures, and they're not going to count as non-creature spells. So I was kind of bummed when I realized that, because that was immediately where my mind went to. But I'm sure there's going to be something that this is built around, and some sort of way to make this work as an archetype within Limited. It just seems kind of perfect for it. Maybe with equipment, maybe there's a lot of expensive equipment that this would work with, and that could be a way to constantly trigger it and get the card draw. And this is also a decent body for equipment, so maybe that's where you're supposed to go with it. I don't know. Let me know how you feel about the card in the comments. But next up, we're moving on to Dark Confidant. That's right, we've got a reprint, and they did it kind of perfectly. This is a 2/1 human wizard for 1 black and 1, and at the beginning of your upkeep, you reveal the top card of your library and put that card into your hand. You lose life equal to its mana value. At one point in time, this card was like a staple in Standard. It was a very powerful card when it first came out. I don't know if it's quite as powerful these days in Standard, because power creep is a hell of a drug, and I think the draw potential for something like this has been surpassed. It's very fragile as well. Pretty much any creature removal whatsoever kills it. But it's still a crazy card, and I'm excited to at least see if maybe I'm wrong, and maybe it could be a real player in Standard. You're going to have to let me know how you feel about it in the comments. I feel like it could be, but it probably won't be a huge contender. That being said, it's still awesome to have Bob back in Standard, and the flavor here is perfect. Fare you well, Bringer of Light. This is, for those who don't know, this is an Ascian, which is one of the main antagonists in Final Fantasy XIV, and that's just perfectly kind of gels with the vibes and the themes of Dark Confidant. It just kind of like works perfect. So really perfect matching of themes for Final Fantasy with a card that already exists. I'm sure that's not the easiest thing to do when you're working with a different IP, so pretty happy about the route they went here and pulling this off. I think it's cool having Dark Confidant back. But moving on, we've got Zel Dynch. This is another one that we spoiled a while back, but I'm pretty sure it was only the leaked version, so we're not going to spend a ton of time on this, but I'm just going to quickly go over it for those that haven't seen it yet. Zel is one of the main characters in the party in Final Fantasy VIII. He is a 0/3 legendary human monk for 1 red and 2. You may play an additional land on each of your turns. He gets +1/+0 for each land you control, and at the beginning of your end step, you return a land you control to its owner's hand. He's going to be absolutely bananas in landfall decks. And the one thing I want to point out that's different now from when we first saw him, when he was leaked earlier, is now we know what we have that came out of Tarkir Dragonstorm, and we have that 6-mana Temur enchantment that nukes the board and then gives you those landfall abilities where you create 4/4 dragons, and being able to combine something like Zel with that just makes Zel even better than we already thought he would have been. But he's just going to be nuts in landfall decks, and we also know that chocobos within the Final Fantasy set are going to thematically kind of be tied into the landfall mechanic as well. So there is more landfall and land shenanigans coming, and Zel just letting you drop 2 lands every single turn, but also constantly putting 1 back into your hand to make sure you never run out of land drops just seems kind of nuts for that deck. I really think this is going to be a competitive, at least tier 1.5 deck, the landfall deck moving forward, and Zel's going to be a huge part of that. I think he's nuts. If you think I'm nuts for thinking that, let me know in the comments. But next up, we've got another new one. This is 𝑥𝑑𝐄𝐈𝐋𝐄𝑑, a 5-mana 4/4 legendary human noble warrior, 2 black and 3. He has the My First Friend ability, so when he enters, you choose a creature an opponent controls. Choose a creature an opponent controls. I need coffee. And then until end of turn, creatures other than Xenos and the chosen creature get -2/-2. So he's sort of like a Massacre Worm that costs 1 less, except there's 1 creature on their side that specifically doesn't get hit that you choose, and you also hit your side. But also, when the chosen creature leaves the battlefield, you transform 𝑥𝑑𝐄𝐈𝐋. So you don't get to kill the creature that you choose as part of his like pseudo sweep ability when he enters, but if you can then kill the creature, you get to flip him. And when you flip him, he becomes Shinryu Transcendent Rival, which, again, they perfectly nailed this as far as flavor when it comes to the game, because this is something that actually happens in the game, and it's specifically triggered having to do with his rival that he's obsessed with going after, which is you in the game. But yes, so this flips into Shinryu Transcendent Rival, an 8/8 legendary dragon with flying, and as it transforms, you choose an opponent, and then it has the Burning Chains ability, so when the chosen player loses the game, you win the game. This seems absolutely bananas in Commander, which makes me really surprised that this is just in the base set. This seems like the perfect card to be in the Commander set. That being said, I'm fine with it being in the base set. I'm going to try to use this in Standard in some way for sure, because it's just too fun. But that being said, it's definitely at its best in Commander. And there's a ton of politics that can come into play. Flipping Shinryu and then choosing a random opponent, now none of your other opponents can kill that opponent or you win. They have to kill you before they kill them, which gets kind of weird. But also, if someone's about to die, you could flip Shinryu and target them as the opponent, and maybe if you could somehow do it at instant speed, with instant speed removal, you could kill the thing, flip to Shinryu, like in the middle of combat when he's about to die, when your other opponent is swinging at them for lethal. Like, there's so many crazy things you could do in multiplayer Commander with this card. It just seems nuts. That being said, I think if you do actually build a Commander deck around this guy, what's actually going to happen most of the time is your opponents are going to get annoyed at the fact that nobody can kill one of these dudes, and they're all just going to kill you first to not have to deal with it. So I don't know if in practice it will be as cool as it has the potential to be. But I'm interested in finding out. And even just having like a poor man's massacre worm that costs 1 less and then can flip into a big 8/8 flying dragon could still be really good for standard, I think, depending on the deck. I don't necessarily think it's as good as massacre worm. There's a lot more hoops to jump through, but it definitely has the potential to be nuts. I'm still going to try and brew with it for sure because I think it's a really cool card. But that brings us to our last card of the day, Y'shtola Rule. And this card does rule, so I'm super stoked. A 3/5 legendary cat druid for 6 mana, 2 blue and 4. That's a lot, but what do you get? At the beginning of your end step, you exile target creature you control, then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. So it's kind of like a Thassa, but it's more expensive. But how does it make up for being more expensive? This other line of text. Then, if it's the first end step of the turn, there is an additional end step after this step. It's important to note that this ability to flicker a creature is going to trigger on both of those end steps. Don't lose sight of that. So, at the very least, you're getting to flicker something twice at the end of your turn, which is already kind of nuts. And since it triggers at the end of your turn, it means as long as you play it while your opponent's tapped out, you're going to get both of those triggers before your opponent can untap and kill Y'shtola with sorcery speed removal, which in the right deck could be a ton of value. In fact, you could use this on Xenos to just potentially wipe the board, right? Get double triggers off Xenos and give everything -4/-4. That could be pretty cool. I don't think that's the best way to use her. But you can get whatever flicker value you can get twice. But then it goes one step further because you're not just flickering twice a turn at your end step. You're getting 2 end steps. So if you have other ways of getting value off your end step, the most popular one that I can think of is Unholy Annex. If you have Unholy Annex out and a demon and Y'shtola, you don't even have to, it doesn't even matter what you target for the flicker ability. You're just going to get 2 end steps. You're going to get to draw 2 cards and drain for 2 twice if you have the demon out. Now, obviously, if you don't have a demon out, it might backfire a little bit because you'll end up losing 4 life to draw the 2 cards when you get both triggers. So you do have to be careful. It's a bit of a double-edged sword if you use it with Unholy Annex, but I definitely see a world where we could have a very powerful Dimir Demons deck that uses Y'shtola. It's also really good with raid mechanics. Stuff like Alesha that can bring a creature back from the graveyard during your end step. Any raid abilities at all, they're going to trigger an additional time because they all happen, they trigger at your end step. They trigger off of you attacking, but they actually trigger during your end step. So all of those raid abilities are going to trigger twice when you have a Y'shtola out, which is also pretty good. I could just see this going somewhere that I can't actually comprehend right now. I just feel like, just like some of the other cards we saw, the potential for this card to go nuts is definitely there. And there's just a ton of untapped potential to be able to use your end step twice. And I can't really think of any other really good examples off the top of my head, but there's definitely going to be something absolutely insane that someone figures out when this set launches, and I can't wait to figure out what that is. Maybe we'll even figure it out. I'm going to do some brainstorming and try to figure out just how crazy we can get with these double end steps. If you have ideas about that, definitely let me know in the comments as well, because my ears are all open. For sure. I want to know what we can do with this, how crazy we can get with it. I want to brew with it for sure as soon as this set drops, and I'm super excited about it. Y'shtola is one of my favorite characters from Final Fantasy XIV. I spent 2,000 hours of 2020 playing that game, and it was kind of life-changing in a way, but that was also the year that I started my channel. So those two things have always kind of been interconnected in my mind. and now having a Final Fantasy set that has Final Fantasy 14 in Magic the Gathering is like bringing those two things together, and it just feels right to me. I'm pretty excited about it. But that's going to do it for today, guys. Tomorrow is the debut, the spoiler season debut at PAX East. We're going to be covering it. I'm going to get it out to you guys like right away. As soon as they drop everything, I'm going to film that video. I'm going to pop it out. I'm going to make sure you guys have all of that juicy info right away. And I can't wait to see what else is coming. Personally, I'm looking forward to seeing the summons more than anything. I think using the saga mechanic coupled with it actually being a creature just fits perfectly with what summons are, and I can't wait to see more of those. But let me know what you're looking forward to in the comments, and I will see you tomorrow. Please like, it helps me get this video out to more people. Please subscribe because more craziness is on the way, and I'll see you there. Thanks so much for checking out my channel. I'd like to give a huge shout out to all of my patrons over at Patreon. Without you guys, this channel would not be possible, so honestly, thank you from the bottom of my heart for all of your contributions. If you haven't yet, like and subscribe. The more likes we get and the quicker we get them, the bigger this channel will grow and the faster it will grow. I'd love nothing more than this channel to become something very special for you guys, but it's entirely up to you how fast that happens. Also, if you'd like more deck text, that's somewhere over there, and if you'd like to see what else the channel's been up to lately, that's somewhere up that way. Also, subscribe, circle below, do all the things.